so you'll have to bear with me for reading a bunch today. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Carrie Baumgart, Vice President of the Colorado Motor Vehicle Dealer Board. Today's date is June 21st, 2022, and the time is 9:13. These proceedings are being recorded as part of the standard process of rulemaking by the board. So I have determined that the quorum of the board is present, so it is possible to proceed. At this time, I'd like to call for a motion to open the hearing to consider proposed rule revisions related to 1 CCR 205-1 regarding motor vehicles and 1 CCR 205-2 regarding power sports vehicles. The board will consider proposed revisions to the existing rules. The board will specifically consider proposed revisions of the following rules. 1, Motor Vehicle Regulation Number 4420-121-7C. 2, Power Sports Vehicle Regulation Number 4420-426C. The board will also specifically consider proposed repeal of the following rule. Power Sports Vehicle Regulation Number 4420-426D. Is there a motion to open the rulemaking hearing?
This is Mr. Flowers, so moved.
Great. Is there a second?
Ms. Behrens, I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Behrens. Is there any discussion? All right, then, all in favor? Sorry, I don't have my list here, so we're going to go in order. We got Behrens. Ms. Gordon?
Yes, approve.
Mr. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
And Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
It looks like we don't have Tesfaye or Chandler and Behrens. Okay. Then the motion to open the rulemaking hearing passes, and we will begin. Before we initiate the public comment phase, I will invite Executive Secretary Chris Rouse to provide an overview and background as well as an explanation of the WebEx platform we are using and the process for signing up to make comments and/or submit documents. Ms. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome board members, stakeholders, and guests to this rulemaking hearing. We're using the Cisco WebEx platform for this hearing. Board members are panelists and they can mute and unmute themselves as needed during the course of the hearing. Everyone else is an attendee. For those of you that are attendees and wish to testify during the public comment phase, there is a sign-up sheet that is located on our website. I would ask that if you haven't already done so, please put your name on the sign-up sheet. The sign-up sheet will ensure that we give all that wish to comment the opportunity to be heard. It will also become part of the official rulemaking record. I will put that link to the sign-up sheet in the chat box at the end of my little spiel here for those that need it. When we reach the public comment phase, we will be using that sign-up sheet and will let you know when you have been unmuted and can be heard by everyone. When you've completed your comments and answered any questions that the board may have regarding your testimony, Arlene will then mute the microphone. Now, I will give you some background on why we're engaged in this rulemaking process. Congress enacted Title III of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, which amended the Federal Child Support Enforcement Program. Of relevance here is 42 U.S.C. 666A16, under which the state has the authority to withhold or suspend driver's licenses, professional and occupational licenses, and recreational and sporting licenses of individuals owing overdue support or failing after receiving appropriate notice to comply with subpoenas or warrants related to paternity or child support proceedings. In response to the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, the Colorado General Assembly passed House Bill 97-1205. It added several statutory provisions concerning occupational and professional licenses of those delinquent on their child support obligations. Section 2613-126 of the Colorado Revised Statutes is part of the Colorado Support Enforcement Act. It authorizes the Department of Human Services to request the denial, suspension, or revocation of any professional, occupational, or recreational license issued by state licensing agencies after following certain required communications with the child support obligor and exhaustion of the child support obligor's rights of review. The division, in collaboration with Assistant Attorney General Sarah Colleen and the stakeholders, worked on the proposed changes you see before you today. Currently, there are two somewhat parallel rules, one pertaining to motor vehicles and one pertaining to power sports vehicles. I say somewhat parallel because the current power sports rule has a separate subsection D, which in the proposed rule, we have rolled that up into subsection C, making the proposed power sports rule mirror the motor vehicle rule. This means that if the board adopts the proposed revisions to the power sports rule 4420, 420, paren 6C, you will then need to repeal 4420, 426D, as it will be duplicative. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Rouse. And let's see, so the formal rulemaking hearing is now open. The hearing will proceed according to the provisions of the Colorado Administrative Procedures Act, specifically Section 244103 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, and according to other relevant provisions of the law, regulation, and policy. Today's rulemaking hearing received official public notice on March 25th, 2022 by means of publication in Volume 45, Number 6 of the Colorado Register. Public notice for the Rule 4420, 121.7C and 1 CCR 205-1 related to motor vehicles came under tracking number 2022-00137. Public notice for Rules 4420, 426C, and 4420, 426D, and CCR 205-2 related to power sports vehicle came under the tracking number 2022-00138. Supplemental public notice took place through publication on the websites of the Department of Regulatory Agencies and the Auto Industry Division of the Department of Revenue. Today's rulemaking hearing offers any interested person the opportunity to make oral comments to the board on one or more of the rules under review, or to provide additional documents to the board for consideration, or both. The hearing is quasi-legislative in nature, not adversarial. All viewpoints are welcome. Anyone can speak and share information and opinions regarding to the rules under review. The board has before it the record for board review. Included in the record are the following: the current text of the motor vehicle related rule the board will consider in the rulemaking hearing, along with the red line text version and the clean text version of that rule. The current text of the power sports vehicle related rules the board will consider in the rulemaking hearing, along with the red line text version and the clean text version of that rule. Materials related to the initial working group meeting held on March 2nd, 2022. Filing and notice materials related to the Secretary of State's Office tracking number 2022-00137, motor vehicle related rule. Filing and notice material related to the Secretary of State's Office tracking number 2022-00138, power sports vehicle related rules. Filing and notice materials related to the Department of Regulatory Agencies filing under 1 CCR 205-1, motor vehicles. Filing and notice materials related to the Department of Regulatory Agencies filings under 1 CCR 205-2, power sports vehicles. Notice of hearing with proposed draft rules to interested persons. Comments from the interested persons and the public received after the publication of the official notice of hearings by May 27th, 2022. Ms. Spellerberg, the subject matter expert and rules administrator for the Auto Industry Division, will introduce the record in general and then provide the Auto Industry Division's position on the rule. The board will then entertain public comments on the rule. The board members may ask the division and any public commenter as many relevant questions as the board may have regarding any particular rule. After the public comments have concluded, Ms. Spellerberg will be permitted to comment further as needed on the rules. The board will close the public comment phase of the rulemaking hearing after all public comments and the potential additional comments from the division have been made on the rules the board has before it for consideration today. Once the public comment phase has ended, the board will enter into the deliberative phase, and it will not entertain any further comments from the division or from the public. During the deliberative phase, the board will engage in discussions and deliberate as long as necessary upon the written record for the board review, together with any written materials made part of the comprehensive records subsequent to May 27th, 2022, written materials received after, and any written submissions received in the course of the board's hearing today. The board's deliberations will also include the oral comments of the division and the public made during the public comment phase. The board will deliberate on the rules brought before the board in the hearing today. The board will make some decision today. For the rules, the board has the options, including but not limited to the following. It may adopt the proposed rules as presented by the division, or it may repeal the rule as presented by the division, or it may adopt the proposed rules as presented by the division, but with modifications made by the board, or it may table the rules for consideration later in the meetings, or it may continue its deliberations on the rule until a later date that it announces, or it may reject the proposed rule as presented by the division. If the rules presented by the division are entirely new rules, then that new rule would not come into existence. If the rules presented by the division is a revised rule or a proposed deletion of a rule, then the rule in its current form continues in existence. After an action has been taken on a rule, the board will close considerations of that rule. The Vice President, the public comment phase of the hearing will now begin. Beth Spellerberg, who is the Legal Assistant and Rules Administration for the Auto Industry Division and the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board, will make the division's presentation of record to the board. Ms. Spellerberg, you have the floor at this time. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Madam First Vice President and Ms. Executive Secretary. Good morning. I want to thank all the stakeholders, the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board, the AG's office, and our staff for their commitment and dedication to making the 2021 rulemaking session so successful. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules, your hard work, and your passion. So let's begin. The rules under review are 1 CCR 205-1, Regulation 4420-121-7C for motor vehicle dealers, and this is the unfitness of financial character or record. And then there's a parallel regulation, 1 CCR 205-2, Regulations 4420-420-6C and 4420-420-6D. Unfitness of financial character record for power sports vehicle dealers. Prior to the first working group, AID provided stakeholders in an email dated February 11th, 2022, the current language of both unfitness of financial character records, regulations, and proposed rule changes to the stakeholders for their review and consideration. Now, please refer to Rule Group 3-4 in your rulemaking packet. This details the changes that were made to the regulations. So 1 CCR 205-1, Regulation 4420-121-7C for motor vehicle dealers. I just want to say thank you to Sarah Colleen. Our AG drafted this language that was so beautifully written to add into the regulation, and she did an amazing job. So she came up with the language to add, and I'll just read it because it's kind of hard just to just throw out the words. But the board, in determining whether a licensee or applicant has demonstrated unfitness of financial character record, will consider net worth, liquid assets including cash, lines of credit, marketable securities, credit reports, unpaid judgments, and/or tax liens, delinquent debts, and bankruptcy status. Also, child support obligation status. And then we go on to subparagraph 1 was already in the regulation, but Sarah drafted language to add subparagraph 2, And subparagraph 3. Subparagraph 2, any license for which an application has been made pursuant to this Part 4 may be denied if at the time of the application, the board received notice that the applicant failed to comply with a court or administrative order for current child support, retroactive child support, or child support arrears. If the board receives notice of the applicant's noncompliance pursuant to sections 2435-116 and 2613-126 Colorado Revised Statutes, the application may be denied. Subparagraph 3. Any license for which an application for renewal has been made pursuant to this Part 4 may be denied on a conditional basis if, at the time of the renewal application, the board received notice that the applicant failed to comply with a court or administrative order for current child support, retroactive child support, or child support arrearages pursuant to sections 2435-116 and 2413-126 Colorado Revised Statute. Now for the parallel regulation for the power sports vehicle dealers, please refer to page RG3-8 in your packet. So what's interesting about this is that the prior regulation had the, I'll get to that. Let's just go to 4420, 426, 6C. Again, we added the language and child support obligation status to the financial unfitness of financial character or record regulation. And then we added subparagraph 1, which used to be second part of the regulation, that when the people that originally created the regulation, they created regulation 4420, 426D, and had the language failure to timely pay any fine imposed by the board or the submission of a draft or check for the payment of any fee required by the board, which is dishonored, shall be deemed to demonstrate unfitness of financial character record. So in the motor vehicle dealer regulation, that is on its own. And we added that to the, sorry, I'm trying to explain this, but the original draftees of these regulations, they weren't parallel. And so what we did is we removed in its entirety and added a subparagraph 1 in subsection C above to mirror the motor vehicle dealer's parallel regulation. Hope that makes sense. So for the power sports vehicle dealers regulation 4420, 426C, we have subparagraph 1, which I've previously read, then we have subparagraph 2, and these mirror the motor vehicle dealer parallel regulation. So at the first working group meeting 1, which was held on March 2nd, 2022, the stakeholders discussed the proposed language modifications that were sent out to all stakeholders, and Sarah Colleen, as I mentioned earlier, drafted the proposed language. At that meeting, all the stakeholders agreed to the language modifications that were discussed. It was like the easiest stakeholders meeting I've ever experienced. As a result, we just went ahead with the rulemaking process. On March 3rd, 2022, we filed the notice of rulemaking hearing at the Secretary of State's office website, which is found on pages RG323 through RG327. And then the power sports vehicle dealers, we filed the same notice found on pages RG3-29 through 33. On the same date, we also filed the submission of proposed rule and statement in plain language of the subject matter or purpose of the proposed rule amendment with the Department of Regulatory Agencies website for motor vehicle dealers, found on pages RG335 through 36, and for the power sport vehicle dealers, found on pages RG338 through 40. On May 24th, 2022, we sent out to all the stakeholders the notice of rulemaking hearing with proposed rule for both motor vehicle dealers and power sports vehicle dealers. This is found on pages RG3-42 through 51. This notice advises stakeholders that the rulemaking hearing is scheduled for June 21, 2022 at 9 a.m. The stakeholders were also advised that the deadline to submit written statements is by 5 p.m. on May 27, 2022. Now on page RG3-53 of your packet, as of May 31st, 2022, neither the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board nor the Auto Industry Division received any public comments by mail, email, or fax transmission related to the board's regulations set for review at today's June 21, 2022 rulemaking hearing. The final proposed language modifications for the board's review and consideration includes the current, the red line, and clean versions. And not to just, be redundant and to repeat myself, I've already gone over the modifications. Nothing was changed per the stakeholders meeting, so I'm not going to read it to you again. And so what I would like to do is provide you with the Auto Industry Division's position on the proposed regulations set forth in front of you today. The Auto Industries Division's goal is to propose simple, effective, and enforceable rules that do not adversely affect the industry's ability to be successful, but to keep the paramount issue of consumer protection at the forefront. That being said, the division supports the proposed revisions and find that the modifications do not impact the overall concept of what the division and stakeholders agreed to in principle. This concludes my presentation, Madam First Vice President. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bellerberg. So the division has finished its presentation of record, and it is time to hear comments from the public. If anyone in the audience has not signed up to give comments, please do so now. Would someone please identify how many people have indicated they want to make a public comment?
I have 2 people that have signed up for public comment on this rulemaking.
Okay. So it sounds like based on the number of persons who have indicated they want to address the board, we do not find it necessary to limit the time. So I've determined that it's not to limit the time for each person to speak, but please, everyone, make your comments as succinct as possible. Ms. Rouse or Mr., I don't even see Mr. Opeka on here, but Ms. Rouse, could you please tell me who is first?
Yes, it is Nathan Bork. And give a quick second for Miss Arlene to unmute Mr. Bork's microphone before he starts his testimony.
Great. And I will just say, Mr. Bork, we need you to identify yourself by stating your full name, and please spell your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Nathan Bork. It's Nathanbork. I'm from Colorado Automobile Dealers Association, and we understand the confines of the regulation, and we support it.
Thank you, Mr. Bork. I appreciate that. Any further comments?
No.
Okay. Then, let's see, I guess, Ms. Rouse, if you want to let me know who is next.
Yes, the next person who has signed up to give testimony is Matthew Sowash.
Great. And Matthew, same applies to you, please. State your name for the record and spell it.
Matthew Sowash, MATTHEWSOWASH. And I apologize, we wanted to do, we have our dealership application that's coming up, and that's what we want to do testimony on.
Okay. All right. So no comment on the rulemaking.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Rouse, did anyone else sign up?
I do not see anyone else on the sign-up sheet, but I would like to offer the opportunity for anyone who is in the audience that wishes to testify. You could raise your hand and we could let you testify. I'm seeing no hand raising, so I will say that is the end of the public comments, Madam Chair.
Okay. So it sounds like, and the division, does the division have any further comments it wants to make at this time with regards to the rules being considered today?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Then we have reached the conclusion of the public comment phase of the rulemaking hearing. I'd like to thank everyone who has participated in the process today and everyone who has otherwise participated in the rulemaking process to date for all of their input and hard work. At this time, I'd like to call for a motion to close the public comment phase of the hearing to consider proposed rule revisions to A, 1 CCR 205-1, Regulation 4420-121, 7C, regarding motor vehicles, and B, 1 CCR 205-2, Regulation 4420-426C, and finally, and D, repeal of 1 CCR 205-2, 4420-426D regarding power sports vehicles. Is there a motion to close the public comment phase of the rulemaking hearing?
This is Luke Walsh. I'll make a motion to close the public comments section.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Is there a second?
This is Ms. Behrens. I'll make a second to close the rulemaking hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Behrens. Is there any further discussion? All right. Then all in favor, Ms. Gordon?
Yes, in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Flower?
Yes?
Mr. Shaughnessy?
Yes.
Great. Then it sounds like we have nobody opposed. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. The motion to close the public comment phase of the rulemaking hearing passes unanimously. The public comment phase of rulemaking hearing is now closed. No further comments from the public or the division will be allowed without explicit recognition by the president. All right, so I don't think we need a break. Do you guys think we need a break? No? Okay, we're gonna just keep going. All right, the board will now begin the deliberation phase of rulemaking hearing. The deliberation phase is open to the public, but only board members and the Attorney General representative are permitted to participate without being asked a question by the board member or without being specifically recognized by the chairperson in order to add a clarifying or explanatory comment to assist the board in reaching the best possible determination. It is important that everyone remain silent during the board's deliberations. A deliberation phase will take place regarding both rules discussed today. Today's hearing includes actually 3 rules, 1 motor vehicle rule related rule and 2 power sports vehicle related rules. Therefore, these will be the only 3 rules discussed. The board will deliberate the 3 rules, and at the conclusion of the discussion, the board will vote on the rules discussed. The board members have in front of them a packet for the 3 rules at issue. Included in each packet will be the current version of each rule in the packet and the red line version showing the changes proposed for each rule in the packet, and the clean version showing how the rule would look if proposed changes were all adopted. The deliberation phase is now open. Is there any comments by the board?
This is Fletcher Flower. I, read through it and, what I'm looking at, I think makes sense. I wouldn't object to any of it.
This is Ms. Behrens. I agree. I agree with Mr. Fletcher, and I really appreciate the people that participated in the rulemaking portion to get this added to the rules. I know that we've seen some applicants in the past that this has come up on, but because it wasn't part of the rules, it was something we couldn't address or include in our evaluation of the candidates. So I appreciate this being included in the rules. Well done. I'm in support.
This is Mr. Shaughnessy. I agree with Ms. Barron's and Mr. Fletcher's comments as well.
This is Luke Walsh. I also echo those statements.
Great. Well, it sounds like the board has pretty much concluded the deliberation phase. Are there any other comments? Okay, then we have concluded the deliberation phase of the 3 proposed rules. The board will now vote on each proposed rule. First, we will vote on 1 CCR 205-1, Regulation 4420 121-7C, related to motor vehicles. I'd like to call for a motion for final adoption of 1 CCR 205-1, Regulation 4420 121C, related to motor vehicles as proposed and publicly noticed by the division.
This is Mr. Shaughnessy. I move that the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board adopt the proposed revisions to 1 CCR 205-1, Regulation 44-20-121, paren 7, paren C, related to motor vehicles as proposed and publicly noticed by the Auto Industry Division.
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. Do I hear a second?
I would second that. This is Mr. Flower.
Thank you, Mr. Flower. Is there any discussion? All right then, all in favor, Ms. Barron's,
Yes.
Ms. Gordon,
Yes.
and Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Great. The motion passes. 1 CCR 205-1, Regulation 4420 121-7C, related to motor vehicles as proposed and publicly noticed by the division is formally adopted. All right, now we will vote on 1 CCR 205-2, Regulation 4420 426C, relating to power sports vehicles. I'd like to call for a motion for final adoption of 1 CCR 205-2, Regulations 4420 426C, as proposed and publicly noticed by the division.
This is Mr. Shaughnessy. I move that the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board adopt the proposed revisions to 1 CCR 205-2, Regulation 44-20-420, paren 6, paren C, related to power sports vehicles as proposed and publicly noticed by the Auto Industry Division.
Great, thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. Do I hear a second?
I would second that.
All right,
Mr.
Mr. Flower, thank you. All right, then all in favor, Ms. Barron's,
Yes.
did I miss that? Ms. Barron's?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Gordon?
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Great. The motion passes. 1 CCR 205-2, Regulations 4420 426C, related to power sports vehicles as proposed and publicly noticed by the division is formally adopted. Now we will vote on 1 CCR 205-2, Regulation 4420 426D, relating to power sports vehicles. I'd like to call for a motion to repeal 1 CCR 205-2, Regulation 4420 426D, as proposed and publicly noticed by the division.
This is Mr. Shaughnessy. I move that the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board repeal 1 CCR 205-2, Regulation 44-20-420, paren 6, paren D, related to power sports vehicles as proposed and publicly noticed by the Auto Industry Division.
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. Do I hear a second?
I would second that.
Thank you, Mr. Flower. Is there any discussion? All right, then all in favor, Ms. Barron's,
Yes.
Ms. Gordon,
Yes.
and Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Great, the motion passes. 1 CCR 205-2, Regulation 4420 426D, related to power sports vehicles as proposed and publicly noticed by the division is formally repealed. We have reached the conclusion of the entire rulemaking hearing, and I'd like to thank the board members and everyone else who has participated in the process today. At this time, I'd like to call for a motion to close the hearing. Is there a motion to close the rulemaking hearing?
This is Luke Walsh. I'll make a motion to close the rulemaking hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Is there a second?
This is Ms. Gordon, I second it.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Is there any discussion? All right, then all in favor, Ms. Behrens,
Yes.
Mr. Flower,
Yes?
and Mr. Shaughnessy.
Yes.
Great, the motion to close the rulemaking hearing passes. I declare this rulemaking hearing closed. Yay. All right, Ms. Rouse, do